Good time of day, everybody, and welcome to our panel, SDVerse Accelerating SDV Adoption. My name is Konstantin Sharakinsky. I'm partner with Roland Berger and leading our software technology cluster. Let me introduce our panelists, starting with Prashant Gulati, the CEO of SDVerse. Mr. Gulati is a visionary leader whose 20 years tenure in technology and automotive industry has been marked by an impressive trajectory of building and scaling innovative businesses. His experience includes spearheading strategy, product development, sales, finance, and seized emerging technologies, particularly in software and artificial intelligence. His contributions to the field have been recognized by Business Insider magazine among the top EV industry power players and published by prominent magazines such as AI Magazine, EV Magazine, and Sustainability. Prashant is also recognized as a top voice in AI by LinkedIn. Our next panelist is Dan Nicholson. Dan is General Motors Vice President for Strategic Technology Initiatives. Prior to this appointment, Dan was the Vice President of Global Electrification Controls, Software and Electronics, where he led the organization from 2019 until 2022. And before that, Vice President of Global Propulsion Systems. In that role, he was responsible for all propulsion products, including engines, transmissions, fuel cells, electric drive units, and batteries. Dan is a recognized professional engineer in the state of Michigan. He is on the SAE board of directors and serves as vice president of automotive. Dan is the GM member company representative at US Car Council and the member of the US Drive Executive Steering Group. He's also past president of the Engineering Society of Detroit and a past president of FICITA, and was recognized in 2019 as Automotive News All-Star. Our next panelist is Jörg Grotendorst, who became Senior Vice President of Corporate R&D at Magna International at the beginning of 2023. He's responsible for selection of future technologies and innovation implementation processes. Previously, Jörg was a member of the executive board at Rheinmetall AG, where he was in charge of the automotive business. He also gained experience as Executive Vice President of e-mobility at ZF Friedrichshafen, as well as at Siemens, Continental, Ford, and Daimler. His focus here was on the areas of electrification, powertrain, and chassis control systems. The next panelist is Dr. Swaroop Mandal, who brings more than 3 decades of experience within the automotive sector. Throughout his career, he has been dedicated to providing cutting-edge technology and engineering solutions, thereby facilitating the success of clients worldwide. Dr. Mandal demonstrated his commitment to innovation and industry advancement with a track record of filing 12 patents in automotive engineering and contributing to the development of technology standards, including those endorsed by ISO. Notably, he played a pivotal role in conceptualizing and shaping the strategy behind the creation of SDVerse. And last but not least, Katrine Mattes, who is the Chief Technology Officer of Ampere Software Technology by Renault Group and VP of Innovation Technology. In these roles, Katrine is responsible for software technology roadmaps and innovation, and she also represents Renault in external forums. Prior to joining Renault, Katrine held a platform software lead architect position at Intel for all Android-based smartphone, tablet, and automotive infotainment platforms, covering overall software architecture integration of different technology domains from video graphics to security and power management. Before Intel, Katrine worked 17 years at Texas Instruments, where she served in different roles from software development to architecture. She holds master's degree and double diploma in electrical engineering and telecommunications from University of Karlsruhe and INPG University in Grenoble. Welcome, everybody. And without further ado, let me jump to the key questions of our panel, starting with the definition of SDVs. SDVerse is being created to help automotive industry accelerate its transition to the software-defined vehicles. So let's start by discussing what exactly software-defined vehicles are and why it's so relevant. Dan, maybe first question to you. What does SDV mean to you, and how is it shaping the automotive industry?
Well, software-defined vehicle means many things, but the key element that I think is most important is really decoupling the hardware from the software. And in doing so, the vehicle becomes a software platform. The customer will benefit a lot from this transition to software-defined vehicle. They'll see it through enhanced over-the-air capability, new features and content without changing hardware. And we're really moving from an era where literally today there are hundreds of ECUs on a typical vehicle to more either zonal compute or central compute platforms. So in the past, we've been a very hardware-focused industry, and that has meant years of lead time development in order to bring new features to market. This move to a software-defined vehicle will make us much more agile and fast in terms of bringing features to market. One of the important aspects as well is that because of this transition to software-defined vehicle, the market for automotive software is expected to double during this decade. So it's a big, important transition, and software-defined vehicle is coming step by step, and it's really a journey and not really a destination.
Thanks, Dan. Prashant, so in this context, what do you see as the key implications of the shift to SDVs and the key benefits of that shift?
Yeah, so like Dan mentioned, this, our industry is going through this transformative period, this major shift. Cars so far have had, let's say, ECUs and with some chips and some software, to becoming completely software defined, right? To completely becoming computers on wheels, as you've called them, right? So this is very reminiscent of, let's say, the smartphone era, right? How things change from feature phones to smart devices on wheels. So that's what we are seeing right now. Obviously, that, like Dan mentioned, there's a lot of complexity that comes with that, but also a tremendous amount of opportunity. And I think the biggest beneficiaries of this will be consumers, right? And there are a lot of benefits, but let me just touch on three that I think are very exciting for me, right? Number one is a personalized user experience driven by software and AI. So right from seating to heating to navigation to, just to give an example, right? I mean, I care about sustainability, so do you and a lot of other people. You can get your route recommendations now based on energy consumption, right? That didn't happen before, right? It's a small example, but very meaningful. So personalized user experience is constant over-the-air updates like you see in your phones. So that's one benefit. Another is cost savings, right? So with more predictive maintenance and diagnostics, consumers end up saving more. And thirdly is safety and reliability, right? With driver monitoring, with autonomous driving systems, this software enabled, all of this is very meaningful for consumers. But at the same time, it's both an opportunity and a challenge for the industry, right? So far, our profit pools have been around, let's say, vehicle sales, parts services, financial services, and that's going to change, right? And so we need to adapt. Um, and there's a lot of work that we need to do as an industry, and a lot of work that's going on, and some of which, was the driver behind creating SDVerse, which we'll talk about.
Thank you, Prashant. I mean, the promise of SDV sounds really great, but for some reason we have already seen that transition in other spaces, right. Not yet to a large extent in automotive. So this transition probably comes with quite a few unique challenges. It does require a complete paradigm shift across the entire value chain in the way the industry thinks about vehicle development process, software development process, anything from procurement to production. Katrine, from a perspective of an OEM, what do you see as the key challenges in this transition towards software-defined vehicles?
Yeah, so in this transition, so we see the centralization comes with high-performance computing. So we know high-performance computing from many different areas, and that brings also a shift in the software content that then in turn will be used to bring value to our customers. And so we are shifting from a whole software ecosystem that historically was microcontroller based or just a classic based to much more high level OS, POSIX, Linux, QNX, Android based system. If we compare it with other HPC environments, what we used in these environments is that we can buy software off the shelf, there are OSs, there is software content that is easily available. In theory, it applies to the environment that we deploy, but today we still stick with our historical software sourcing, sometimes even tied to hardware sourcing approaches and processes. And the challenge is that this probably doesn't scale in the SDV context. And it means the challenge is to source software differently and to get access actually to a complete software offering as it is available in other environments. And then also have a much better time to market. Because today, if we look at the processes to purchase software components that could theoretically be available off the shelves, the process is very lengthy. And so make versus buy, and then you need different suppliers and a lengthy monthly decision process. And that is contrary to the objective of SDV, is to bring quickly and incrementally over life cycle new value to our vehicles.
Thanks, Katrin, for sharing that perspective from an OEM who has traditionally been in the position of a buyer. Speaking about traditional positions as a seller, Jörg, can you share your perspectives on the challenges of the SDV transition from a tier one perspective? Jörg, I believe you're muted.
Yes, sure, will do. Thanks, Konstantin. As we have already heard from Daniel and Katrin, there is a fundamental change in the industry. And of course, there's a large difference in between OEMs and suppliers how to approach software in the future for software-defined vehicles. OEMs are used to buy hardware, as we have heard, in up to 100 ECUs. And these hardware with ECUs and other smart systems very often contains software. Software by itself to be a business model is not yet established in the industry. And most of the OEMs define and specify their software tailor-made for their products. Whereas tier ones and tier twos, of course, have a business model to share software technology and software algorithms in between different applications and different OEMs. And this is, as Katrin already said, a very good matchmaking platform. I think we all agree when it comes to more software, more applications, and more software modules, at the end, lines of code in the software, quality becomes more relevant, testing becomes more relevant, and that's why we need more standard. I think AUTOSAR is a good example. And if we can publish software and share it in between different automotive customers and share it in between different use cases, all of us will benefit. There's a new market segment that will come up for software, but the software that then can be sold or purchased from the other side will have a higher quality standard, and that means less effort for test and qualification, and makes it cheaper, faster, and easier to use at the end.
Excellent. Thanks, Jörg. So we had an OEM, we had a tier one, but the value chain is obviously much more complex, especially if we think about the value chain for software engineering and automotive. Swaroop, from a position of an engineering services provider, how do you see that transition, and how do you see the challenges that come with this transition?
Yeah, Konstantin, this is a very important questions today for the all ecosystem player. By now, it is established that we are going through a tectonic change, I should say. It's not a small change today. So if I try to really build the answer from the base, that today, if we look at the traditional way of building any vehicle platform, is much more coming through each ecosystem player is much more a defined way. We have got a very detailed specifications. We have got very tailored to the particular requirements. And also you have got a well paced out time to develop that. So there is a established process which is much more sequential in nature today. But if we look at the era of SDV, where already people say that two major things which actually industry is grappling to solve is the updatability, smooth updatability of the vehicle platforms. And the second piece, of course, the affordability. That means not at an exorbitant cost. These are the two fundamental questions actually industry is to answer. So is for us to answer that. So if we look at from engineering service provider point of view, then updatability is, if we look at the start of production, that is a pure word people use it. So for any SDV, there is no clean start of production until you upgrade the hardware completely. But now, since hardware is not upgraded so frequently, hence your start of production is almost incremental today. So whenever you build new feature or enhance the performance of the features, that is equivalent to SOP. Hence, your process should be much more matured, ruggedized, and continuous integrations and continuous development and deployment is the path that needs to be established in the software development. That is one clean change which actually ensures the updatability. And the second, of course, the affordability. Now, when a vehicle get developed, so the computing resources today not only residing within the vehicle, also outside the vehicle. So hence, we need to really properly balance the computing infrastructure provisioning within the vehicle and outside the vehicle. Hence, our capability for the engineering service provider today has to be chip to cloud. So that means it from one end to other end, which will help the ecosystems to build the vehicle much robust and much faster. Second point, which is strikingly different, is the visibility and relationship. As we know that, as Dan mentioned in the beginning, it is a journey, not a destination. So that means you can imagine that we have got the vehicle today at different state of SDV. Different state of SDV means I am saying that in terms of how far the softwareized ECUs are getting used in the vehicle. More and more softwareized ECU are getting into the vehicle, more mature at SDV platform is. Depending on the product roadmap, depending on the vehicle platform roadmap, the selections of different components which is available in the market is important to make it more cost effective. So hence our relationship within the ecosystem should be much more transparent and much more visible, which otherwise in the traditional way, it was not the necessity because it was always coming with a defined specifications. Hence the two clean differences for ESP, two clean challenges or I should say the activity for ESPs. One is of course the approach and capability, it has to be enhanced. And second, getting in the relationship with the ecosystem is much more visible and much more transparent, and relationship with the end customers is also much more stronger. So these are the two distinct changes we could see in the ESP's engagement in SDV.
Thank you, Swaroop. Despite all these challenges, we do see a lot of organizations in the automotive industry starting to embrace the transition. I'd like to ask Jorg to describe how Magnum has engaged in the shift.
Yes, thanks, Konstantin. And of course, we are engaging and preparing the company to become stronger in software-defined vehicle functionality. As you may know, we offer full vehicle design services, manufacturing, and even down to systems and components. So we help from our capabilities, OEMs to specify and at least realize driving behavior. So we already started the business to offer a software that we call Magna operating software that combines driving behavior made out of steering, chassis, and powertrain behavior. And of course, we are one of the largest ADAS providers in the world, offering camera systems, radar systems, and other sensorics all around which we need for an ADAS functionality. And of course, we are challenged every day by implementing different kinds of functionalities on different kind of ECUs. So what we did is we defined internally a roadmap how to standardize all our software functionalities and modules across all our product groups. May this be driver monitoring, may this be camera system, may this be powertrain, or anything else that you can imagine. And from that starting point, we defined an architecture that we define internally as standard, but just make sure that the software above this hardware is in the future independent of the SoC behind. That means we are preparing a complete software tool chain that decouples software from the hardware. And we are preparing ourselves to offer the tool suite to configure the software during the design and development process just in parallel. This, of course, shall help customers and ourselves to easier implement and adopt applications wherever they are from: seating control, powertrain control, chassis, or ADAS functions. And that's our roadmap into the future. And of course, to have modularity and standardized, tested and qualified software is a key element for this.
Thanks, Jörg. It's really great to see that the company is already thinking about and delivering software-only products and thinking about how the buyers can actually integrate them in their own environments. The question is how do those products now get to market? And hopefully, SDVerse would assist in that and assist in the transition towards software-defined vehicles. SDVerse is now building a B2B platform for buying and selling automotive software. But there is much more to that. So, Prashant, if I can ask you to elaborate on what is SDVerse.
Yeah. So I think this was a very well-rounded point of view that we got from OEMs, from suppliers, from ESPs, and if I can just summarize the problem that SDVerse solves, and then I'll talk about how. But I think we heard that in the industry today, while we're making this transition, but majority of buying of software is coupled with hardware. So hardware is coupled with software, right? Jörg mentioned there is, as a business model, software buying does not necessarily exist by itself, right? The industry has excelled at buying hundreds of billions of dollars of, call it, boxes every year that are coupled with software, but that process is just slowing us down as we move towards this transition to SDV. So, the founding members, GM, Magna, Wipro, looked at this problem, obviously, with their perspectives in the value chain, and realized this is not a one company problem. This is an industry problem, right? And so they came together to solve this as an industry. And so they created this startup, this company outside of a corporate environment, a company called SDVerse, where I am at. And what we do is SDVerse is an online marketplace that connects buyers and sellers of automotive software, right? And so let me take an example. Let's say you are an automaker and you're looking today to build an automated parking software, right? Now, you can, once we are live on SDVerse, you as an automaker will be able to log in into SDVerse. You'll be able to compare all options available for this automated parking software. You'll be able to do side-by-side comparisons. You'll be able to see the suppliers that are offering that software. You'll be able to see the attributes of each of those software solutions available, which means certification level, number of cars it's on, etc., etc. You will be able to reach out to suppliers to get more information, and you can do all of that in one place. You can buy a full stack, you can buy some applications. So if you can't contrast it with how it happens today, to buy something, you're going to either call your one supplier or you'll do Google searches, and that's just not efficient because the industry is moving, adapting so fast, right? So that's why we created SDVerse, to bring it all together in one place so we can help move the industry forward faster towards software-defined vehicles. Now, being able to do this live search at any time, the benefit for automakers, for buyers, is that it can reduce their RFI, RFP times. For engineering teams, is that even before they define or make a make versus buy decision, they can see what's available and if it works for them, right? For sellers, it reduces the cycle times or sales cycles, and they can engage with engineering teams much sooner, much ahead of time, right? So there is that tremendous benefit. And just overall, as an industry, to Jörg's point earlier, it promotes reuse, right? So we can focus on what's reusable, what's commodity, versus what's more core, and we can allocate resources accordingly. So that's the concept. That's the portal that we're creating, that people can come and buy software and sell software. And it's been designed from the beginning to be independent. So even though I mentioned we have some founding members and a few launch partners, but it's an independent platform, so not influenced in any way by anyone. And it's industry driven, it's standards agnostic. So you could have software that works for ASIL and it works on AutoSAR. You can list it, you can find more information about it. So it's independent, standard agnostic, and it's for the industry. And just one note on the business model is we have, to promote one of the key principles for the founding members, Geo Magna Vipro, was that, we need to be able to invite not just the big players into this, but advance the industry, which means new and upcoming players, right? So we have a tiered pricing model. So depending on size of the company and revenue profile, you're charged differently, and that's a one-time fee, an annual fee. And there's no transaction fee for usage or consumption.
Thanks, Prashant. And you, as the CEO of SDVerse, your role on the panel is pretty clear. But I dare say we did not select other panelists at random either. They represent our founding members and our valuable launch partners of SDVerse. Can you elaborate on what has been the role of the founders and what will the role be going forward?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think I alluded to some of it. Some of it comes from the role of the founders has been they experience these pain points by themselves, right? Like the process on supply chain, etc., needs to change. At an OEM side, you mentioned, the supply tier ones are having to pivot to a more software defined business model. So all of them came from their different views, but with this common shared vision that we've been talking about SDVs for more than a decade now. We need to realize that vision, that future, and that, and there was some thinking around, can we do this by ourselves? Can we do more bespoke supplier portals or advance more industry standards? And I think after some work, it landed on, the most efficient way to solve this problem is to create an independent marketplace. So that's where we are at right now, right? So the concept and the vision came from founders. The capital came from founders. So we are a well-funded, we are a startup, but we are well-funded. And that takes out the capital risk for any customers on the platform, any employees and other participants for us. And going forward, the role of the founding members is obviously they are on the board and making sure that management is doing their job, that we are realizing our strategy and their vision. But the daily operations of the business, the governance of the business, the who gets to participate or not, any preferential treatment, so none of that is in purview of the founding members. So, which is why I keep emphasizing this is an independent marketplace. It is for the industry by the industry, right? That's how it is being set up. And we're working hard. You saw I am the first employee, and I got hired about a month ago. We are building the team out and working really hard we have a publicly stated commitment to launch the marketplace in September, right? And towards that, we have our founding members, but just as grateful to our launch partners like Ampere, Renault, and FEV, Forvia, HL Mando, NXP Semiconductors, TT Tech Auto, and Valeo. So we have at launch, we have these diverse industry players, and all of them have come together to realize this vision. And we've set up what we call an advisory council to get perspectives and help shape how the platform is going to look like. And we're in the process of inviting a few additional participants to the platform to launch with, and then before we open it up for broader access.
Thanks, Prashant. I think that from your description, what SDVerse is and what the value that it creates is pretty clear. But it would also be great to hear from people who would actually participate on that platform as buyers and sellers. And if I think back to a lot of the discussions that we had on the topic in the last couple of years, a lot of them started with basically frustration about the way things are today and the status quo that it exists there today. So let's talk a little bit more about the challenges of buying and selling software in the traditional automotive B2B context. Katrine, from your point of view, what are the pain points that buyers currently face when buying or trying to buy automotive software?
Yes, Konstantin. So there are a couple of them. So if I take the example from Prashant, right? I want to buy automated parking software. Today, it's hidden in the ECU that is running the software that's dedicated to this function. And I don't even know most of the time who is providing the software to the tier one that's then integrating it and providing to me. So there is no, I would say, transparent listing of different algorithm providers or software function providers where I can see, okay, I need this function. I want to buy it because it's a function, a commodity that I want to have available off the shelf. It's not something where I want potentially to invest my software resources, but then who are the providers of this function? Be able to evaluate quite quickly, how they differentiate potentially the license cost in a very quick process. And that today, all of that doesn't exist for many functions that are needed in the car and that are in particular shifting from a legacy function that had its own sensors, its own ECU, to a centralized function where now I have a high performance compute platform, I have several sensors attached. The only thing I want to buy is actually the software piece that does the function, that does the processing. I don't need anymore a supplier doing the hardware because it's a centralized hardware. It's already there. And so I need to know who are these potential software providers, and I need a way to select them. And this is actually, so SDVerse to me is filling the gap of this particular pain point where today the information and the listing and the sort of catalog of software doesn't exist.
Thanks, Katrine. Yeah, I think it's pretty hard to imagine a functioning market for software when there is no transparency into what the actual products are and who's willing to sell them. So hopefully that changes with SDVerse. Then how do you see SDVerse helping again in this transition and helping with enabling B2B automotive software exchange?
Yeah. General Motors is very excited about SDVerse and the increased transparency that that's going to bring. As mentioned today, we're buying usually bundled hardware and software together. For SDV, we want to buy just the software unbundled from the hardware. And there is really a universe of software out there relative to software-defined vehicles, but we can only see a limited number of software providers today. So I think the transparency of being able to see all the players in the software value chain, not only our excellent tier one suppliers, but tier two and lower level suppliers that are part of the software ecosystem, being able to see that and being able to very efficiently match the needs for the software with what's possibly out there is going to make things much more efficient, and it's really going to speed up RFI and RFQ processes, and the matchmaking ability of SDVerse will really help with that. It'll also help us tremendously with make versus buy decisions, because it's really hard to do a very good make versus buy if you don't really understand the full range of purchase options that are out there today. And so it's going to help OEMs like General Motors focus on, software that we do in-house that's very much brand specific or leading edge technology or very much proprietary for a very good reason, and it'll make us better partners up and down the supply chain through the procurement process.
Thank you, Dan. I think for the audience, it's going to be relatively easy to associate with the frustration that the OEMs like GM and Renault are experiencing in that space. What I found remarkable in the previous conversations that we saw similar frustration on the supplier side.
Yeah.
Jörg, maybe you can tell us how you think about this from the tier one perspective. How would SDVerse help you sell software?
Yeah, of course. Thanks, Konstantin. Well, in an ideal world, this would work hand in hand with what Daniel and Catherine said before. Yeah, what we have to consider as a supplier offering software in the future is from now on, how can we make sure that the key functions that we want to sell in the future are hardware agnostic? And how can we implement easier, faster, and better functionality that offers some kind of a USP? And I think this will be a win-win for both sellers and buyers at the platform. As already said, with reusing software, quality, status will raise, and of course, time to market will be shortened. And that's the point we haven't discussed so far today, because of course, we are all used to smartphones, yeah? And imagine how often you update an app on your smartphone without changing the hardware. And of course, this will become a key element for vehicles of the future as well. Over-the-air updates are meanwhile standard in some markets and with some brands. And of course, this will be standard all across the vehicles in the next decades. So having the chance to keep the vehicle updated and with that offer more functionality that may be of interest to the end customer, offer more features and new functionalities and so on. We see as Magna, of course, as a key chance. And that's why we are really excited to join SDVerse.
Thank you, Jörg. And to close the loop, so we had a perspective of an OEM or OEMs, we had the supplier perspective. From the point of view of engineering services providers, Swaroop, how do you believe such marketplace as SDVerse would change the way you can participate in the automotive software market? Companies like Wipro or companies like FEV who also joined the platform.
Yeah, so Konstantin, it is a, as I mentioned, it is a fundamental change of sourcing, and many of our fellow panelists has already mentioned that the way SDV enabling the sourcing software separately, independent of hardware, so that actually gives a viability of changing the pattern of the sourcing. As of now, today, the sourcing is almost, I can say, the ecosystem of the ecosystem. Relationship between ecosystem players are much more linear. Like tier one is sourcing from tier two is sourcing from tier three. Maybe the OEM does not have the visibility of tier three, what they're doing it, and they are basically tier two's capability to choose the right component is limiting the OEMs to realize the best of it. So, but SDVerse brings in that visibility and transparency where people can choose the best of the breed subsystems based on their platform's goals and objectives. And that leads to the advancement of the SDV platform in terms of the technology, much more homogeneous and much more faster, much more affordable. When affordable, why it is important? Because access to the market for the best of the breed components is much more enhanced today because they can make number of sales than otherwise what they're making today. Hence, the cost of producing that or cost of sourcing that from the buyers will be reduced. And the second point is, of course, the reusability. Instead of building it grounds up, if something is reusable, built by someone, will give the another level of economy in terms of the affordability. Now, what SDVerse enables is that the additional saving which you're getting from building the software can be plowed back either as investment to the more cutting edge features, could be more user-centric features, as well as provisioning hardware, which will give the realizability of the SDV much more stronger. More provision we make, more features in future we can plug in, more updatability will be there. So hence it will enable overall SDVerse will bring in the marketplace the transparency, options of choosing the best of the breed at the right cost. That actually helps the building the SDV platform much more economical. Second point, which is more important, that reusability is the key and the benefit which seller and buyers will be using it. Hence, it will maybe driving towards a standard. Though SDVerse does not speak about choosing any particular standard, but definitely it will be a compelling reasons to adopt a standard, whichever it is, which will bring in bigger benefit by choosing it, because reusability will be more. So these are the two things, and ESPs are in the center of it. They're actually using a lot of components. They're the instrumental to integrate them together. So ESP has got a very central role to play to bring in these two benefits softly, and definitely will be important participants within this SDVerse.
Thank you, Swaroop. We would like to dedicate the last portion of this discussion to the questions that were submitted to the panelists. As we were setting up this panel, we were really happy to see the number of participants joining the panel, but we were also to some extent overwhelmed by the number of questions that came from the audience. We will try to address most of them in this session. I hope that the previous discussion has already answered a few of them. And anything that is not covered in this session, we will provide in a communication to the audience, and we will also put on the website under the FAQ section on SDVerse.auto. But jumping to some of the questions that were submitted by the audience, and then maybe I position the first question to you. The word standard was mentioned several times in this discussion today. Are there any plans to set specific standards for software that is being listed on the platform?
No, there aren't. The SDVerse marketplace is standard agnostic as far as the software that's offered in the marketplace. This is actually one of our important founding principles. This is an open marketplace. Our job is to try and match buyers and sellers. And so SDVerse will be standard agnostic. Having said that, we believe standards add value to, but it's not up to the marketplace to decide which ones add value and which ones don't. What we plan to do is make it very transparent. So if you're listing this software for sale, is AutoZar compliant, or it's ASIL B compliant, et cetera, SDVerse will show those attributes so that buyers and sellers can get very good matches. And so the business of SDVerse is to not decide what the standards should be. It's to make that transparent so that buyers and sellers can meet each other, match each other in a value-added way. I think SDVerse will play a role in, while it's not imposing standards, I think organic or de facto standards will sort of emerge from the process when buyers and sellers start seeing, hey, it looks like everybody else is sort of migrating this way to such and such a standard. Maybe that's the best path. So when you start look at the patterns of what's being bought, what's being sold, I think de facto standards will emerge, which will help to make the industry more efficient, as we've talked about. But again, SDVerse is going to be an open marketplace, not deciding, but also making it very transparent for buyers and sellers.
I think it's a quite innovative approach to leverage market forces to help come up with the standards. We all know how hard it is to put the automotive industry around a table and agree on some of the standards. Prashant, another question to you. As the software being sold on SDVerse platform involves interfacing with different types of hardware that has been mentioned, different architectures, different development environments, different requirements for validation and support will differ. Can you elaborate on how this will function effectively within the context of the marketplace if we're not setting any standards?
Yeah. So I think this it's an important point, right? We are not trying to tilt the scales in favor for any standard or any attribute. I think markets, buyers, and sellers will decide that. But what we are doing is we are for different domain. We're defining a topology. for different, which will have domains within the vehicle, and then subdomains and technologies available and all of that. And so we are defining key attributes that we think will be mandatory before somebody makes a buy or sell decision, or to be able to compare softwares. And then we'll leave the other items optional, right, at the discretion of the seller. So we're creating transparency by making sure at least the mandatory attributes are supplied, and then rest we leave it to communications between the buyer and the seller, which also the communication also will facilitate on the platform itself.
Thanks, Prashant. I would position my next question to Jorg. If I'm looking across the board here, we have multi-billion-dollar organizations on this panel. But as I mentioned previously, the software value chain is probably much more complex. There are so many players, big and small. So how would the marketplace facilitate the entry of newer and smaller software companies into automotive ecosystem? Will partnerships with large established players be required and encouraged to successfully utilize the marketplace, or mitigate its entry via to smaller and younger companies?
Well, I think, Konstantin, what everybody should take away from this discussion, SDVerse is almost open for everybody who wants to join open software market platforms. There is no limitation to a size of company. We have flexible models to join the company and be part of the team. So it is very important that we make visibility of software that is available. And even as of today, we implement as large tier one software from smaller companies. This goes from network services, drivers, diagnostic functions, and whatever. And we definitively do believe it's a benefit for everybody joining this platform, having visibility and the possibility to buy or offer software in different layers of the software that we need within an embedded system. So in a nutshell, there is not a hurdle or a barrier that says company has to be of a dedicated size. It's of course a model that is open for everybody. And if anybody as a startup company or whatever has a great idea to offer software, offer a USP, and believe in the business model that it could add value to tier ones, larger ones, OEMs or whatever, then of course come and join us. Yeah, you're welcome to the team.
Jorg, thank you for that. I think a lot of companies would appreciate this invitation. Now, Swaroop, when we talk about the marketplace, we talk about product, we talk about buyers and sellers, there is always a question of price. What pricing models will be allowed on the SDVerse platform?
So if it is the component on the pricing, no, so then actually it is all the possibilities today exist outside the SDVerse is still applicable to the components which are getting sold within the SDVerse. So it would be much more, I think, which will be much more dominant, which we are going to see is that there are two ways people buy. One is they buy IP, right on the IP to reuse it in different places, or they buy the component and the license part. Okay, so two licenses they get buy. One is code, another is the executables, I should say. So when buyer and seller go up the platforms, try to really get the contract done between buyer and sellers, that still remains the same. The way seller wants to sell or buyer wants to buy, that can be negotiated and that pricing will be there. From the SDVerse point of view, already Prashant mentioned, the revenues and things are pretty clear. It is a subscription based, and like any e-commerce platforms, it would be a commission on the transactions, but SDVerse does not influence the contract between buyer and seller and also to the pricing model.
Thanks, bro. So Prashant, just to you as a CEO, very direct questions. Would there be any limitations on pricing models that the buyers and sellers can negotiate?
We're not taking over the sourcing function on either side or the selling function, right, on the sales side. So the transaction will happen, the matchmaking will happen online on the platform, but the transaction the diligence, any level of detail, all of that has to happen offline, and the pricing negotiation has to happen offline. If, however, for commodity type software, if a seller wants to list their pricing or if they want to hide their pricing, all of that visibility can happen on the platform. But just for compliance and other reasons, the actual transaction, all the contract signing, etc., like Swaroop mentioned, is going to happen offline. And we don't, like I said, we facilitate the players coming together, but we don't participate in the transaction, so to speak.
Thanks, Prashant. Then the next question to you. So buyers, sellers, pricing, but then software is a product. And when people think about software as a product, people think about the code, the algorithm behind it. How would that be shared between buyers and sellers who would be using this platform?
So, like I said, there'll be sellers can provide the level of information that they can, like level of certification, etc. They can provide whether their software is productized enough that it is available, let's say, for download, as an example, right? Versus in some cases, you're going to actually have to do the work and do the verification, validation, and work with the tools. So it'll be, the software does not exist in a plug and play format today, right? What is available and plug and play can be shared offline, but where there is more work to be done, again, that's between the buyers and sellers. So this is, again, to be clear, there's a big problem that we have right now, that just this visibility itself is not there in the industry. That's the problem that we're trying to solve first, right? And then, over time, as we get evolve and all of that, we will consider enabling transactions. But just to be very clear, that file downloads, it's all of that, doing the transaction on the platform is not part of the roadmap in the near future.
So would my understanding be correct that there is no intent of exchanging, let's say, the source code on the platform?
Not on the platform, no.
Appreciate that. Then maybe last question here. Marketplace sounds like an ecosystem, and I think that all the buyers would be very interested to see the shelves of this marketplace stocked as much as possible at the beginning. So when the doors of the marketplace open in September, Prashant, how would you ensure that there is a lot of product, so to speak, in the marketplace from day one for the buyers?
Yeah, it's a good question. See, I mean, I've done a lot of reading around marketplace. We've all used marketplaces to an extent, two-sided, multi-sided. Marketplaces are one of the hardest businesses to build, right? And one of the problems to solve, which is kind of the question that you asked, is how do you make sure that there is engagement? How do you make sure there is product on the shelves? How do you make sure people actually use it, right? So a lot of that work is what we are doing right now. And we made tremendous progress. So at launch, we've already signed up, let's say, 10 customers or 10 participants, right? And one thing that I did not mention earlier, let me just make one point and then I'll, add a couple more. The OEMs and tier one suppliers, OEMs are not only buyers of software, right? They're also sellers of software. So for one fee, right, or one listing on the platform, you can be both a buyer and seller, right? Same thing for Magna and other tier ones. You could be buying or selling software on the platform under that same entity, under the same umbrella. So there's no restrictions from the platform to be able to do that. And in all the conversations we've had with Dan, with Jörg, that is part of the strategy, to be able to offer software as well to advance the industry. And now going back to your question, how are we making sure that there's enough SKUs or product on the shelves? We have at launch 10 members or 10 participants at least, right? Like the 3 founding members and the 7 launch partners that I already mentioned. And we have commitments from them to list software on the platform. We're doing the work with the advisory council to define what kinds of software, what attributes and stuff. And so I think we feel good about the availability of enough software on the platform. That said, we are not resting yet. we're also working with, like I mentioned, we're trying to create the next batch of, let's say, priority access members. It's an invite-only group just to focus on the quality of the group before we open it up, to York's point, to everyone. So that effort is ongoing. Those discussions are ongoing, making sure that there's enough content on the platform, enough software available for both buyers and sellers to look at.
Thanks, Prashant. Looking at the time, and just before moving to the closing statement, I wanted to ask our panelists if you have any further thoughts, ideas, or comments before we close out the session.
Just building on Prashant's point, I'm sure there's a lot of listeners out there that are thinking, hey, this is a pretty interesting idea. I would just encourage you to contact SDVerse.auto and Prashant and consider joining and getting your software on there. It's going to be a great launch in September.
Yeah, one last comment, Konstantin. SDVerse on the face looks like a matchmaking platform. The intent behind this is much more holistic in nature. It will take the SDV frontier technologically much more advanced, and it will be good for the end customers to utilize it in much more better way. And additional dollar which everybody has in this ecosystem will be investing in the frontier technology. That is what SDVerse will be enabling it.
Thanks, Farouk. Big thanks to all the panelists. And before closing out, I would like to hand it over back to Prashant. Prashant, any last comments, ideas? What should the audience walk away with from this discussion?
Yeah, thank you, Konstantin. I think this was a great conversation. And we went over the problem that exists that we're trying to solve. We talked about the solution, right, and the benefits. But I just want to summarize by saying we launched this marketplace because we believe that there is a future out there that's very exciting, right, with software-defined cars. We believe that there is work to be done to get there, and there are many paths to get there, right? We are very convinced that this path, which is an open marketplace, is one of the most impactful paths to get there, right? And more than anything, we think that the IP, the talent, the software exists today to solve a lot of these problems. So buyers, sellers don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? And the purpose of the marketplace is to just bring all of that together, right? So we're working hard to launch this marketplace in September, and we're all very excited about this. Working hard, and if you have ideas, questions for all the listeners, ideas, questions, feedback, thoughts, please reach out to me directly. Or there's an email that I think it shows. It says info@sdverse.auto, or you can reach out to me at prashant.gulati@sdverse.auto. And we very much look forward to working with you. The only way this works is if the industry does it together. I want to reiterate this. GM, Magna, Wipro, all the launch partners could have just done this. They put money in this, could have done this for themselves. There's many ways to have done this, but they've put this capital resources, getting the team behind this to make sure this helps the industry, right? And with that, I think, thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for joining. Very much look forward to comments, questions, insights. And just for all the people who shared questions and did not get those answered, we'll be replying with a replay link of this video if you missed this, and then answers to your questions as well individually. Thank you. Thank you, everyone on the panel. Thank you, Konstantin, for moderating this.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.